Keanu Reeves adjusted his tie as he stepped out of the sleek black car, his calm demeanor hiding the slight unease he felt. The grand charity event was held in a luxurious ballroom, chandeliers gleaming like 1,000 tiny stars. As he made his way inside, the air was filled with polite chatter and the soft clinking of champagne glasses. Guests, dressed in designer suits and glittering gowns, barely noticed the man who had quietly slipped into the crowd. Keanu wasn't here for the attention. He was here to support the cause, a foundation raising funds for underprivileged children. Across the room, a group of wealthy businessmen gathered near the bar, laughing loudly. One of them, Richard Callaway, the CEO of a massive tech company, glanced in Keanu's direction and scoffed. Tall and impeccably dressed, Richard was used to being the center of attention, and his booming voice made it clear he thrived on it. He nudged his friend, a smirk on his face. "Is that Keanu Reeves? What's he doing here looking like he just crawled out of a thrift shop?" His friends chuckled, fueling Richard's arrogance. Keanu, unaware of the mocking eyes on him, moved to the donation table and quietly wrote a check, folding it neatly before slipping it into the box. As he turned, Richard approached, his confidence practically spilling over. "Hey, aren't you that washed-up actor?" he sneered, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Conversations around them quieted as curious eyes turned to the unexpected confrontation. Keanu's lips curved into a faint smile, his calmness unshaken. "I suppose I am," he replied politely, not giving Richard the reaction he was hoping for. Richard scoffed again, shaking his head with exaggerated pity. "Man, I thought you'd be rolling in cash. Guess your movies didn't do too well, huh? You must be really desperate to show up looking like that." Keanu just gave a soft chuckle, not allowing the insult to seep in. "I'm here to support the cause," he said simply, his eyes sincere. Richard raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Yeah? Support it with what? Pocket change? Or did you come here hoping for a free meal?" The crowd around them was now fully invested, some glancing at each other awkwardly, unsure of how to react. One of the event coordinators hurried over, her expression nervous. "Mr. Callaway, Mr. Reeves is one of our biggest supporters. Perhaps we should—" Richard cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Biggest supporters?" he mocked. "Look at him. The guy looks like he walked in from the street. If he's donating anything, it's probably a handful of coins." Keanu gave the coordinator a reassuring nod, letting her know he was fine. His eyes remained kind, even as Richard continued his verbal assault. "You know," Richard said with a condescending smirk, "it's sad how people cling to fame long after they've lost it. Just give up, man. Leave the charity work to those who can actually make a difference." Keanu took a breath, his gentle smile never fading. "Sometimes making a difference doesn't require a spotlight," he replied softly. The crowd seemed to catch the deeper meaning in his words, and a few murmurs spread through the room. Richard just rolled his eyes, oblivious to how uncomfortable he was making everyone feel. As Richard moved back to his circle, still muttering under his breath, Keanu noticed a young girl in a wheelchair, struggling to reach the snack table. Without hesitation, he approached her, crouching down to meet her eye level, offering his assistance with a warm smile. The girl's eyes lit up with gratitude, and Keanu gently helped her fill a plate with treats. Unbeknownst to him, a camera caught the moment, capturing his effortless kindness. Meanwhile, Richard glanced back, scoffing at the sight. "Pathetic," he whispered to his friend. "Acting all humble for the cameras. Typical washed-up celebrity move." Little did he know that his own words were about to come back to haunt him, more powerfully than he could ever imagine. As the evening progressed, the tension between Richard and Keanu seemed to linger in the air. But Keanu remained unfazed, quietly mingling with guests and lending a helping hand wherever needed. His humble and approachable nature didn't go unnoticed, especially among the volunteers who admired how effortlessly he blended in despite his fame. Suddenly, the event host took the stage, tapping the microphone to get everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming to tonight's charity gala. Your generous contributions will go a long way in supporting underprivileged children across the city. The crowd erupted in applause, and Keanu joined in, genuinely touched by the community's effort. The host continued, "We'd like to take a moment to recognize a few individuals whose extraordinary support has made this event possible. First, a big thank you to Mr. Richard Callaway, CEO of Callaway Tech Solutions." Richard strutted onto the stage, flashing his pearly whites and soaking up the applause. He gave a smug wave, leaning into the mic with practiced confidence. "It's a pleasure to be here tonight," Richard began, his voice oozing with pride. "Giving back to the community is important to me, and I believe that those who have been fortunate should always strive to help those who are less privileged." Keanu listened from the back, his expression neutral but thoughtful. The crowd's applause seemed polite, but not particularly enthusiastic, almost as if they could sense the emptiness in Richard's words. The host smiled and nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Callaway. Next, we'd like to extend a special appreciation to someone who has quietly and consistently supported our foundation for several years. A man whose generosity often goes unrecognized because he never seeks the spotlight. Please join me in thanking Mr. Keanu Reeves." A sudden hush fell over the room, and Richard's confident smirk faltered as he turned his head, stunned. Keanu looked genuinely surprised, but the host gestured for him to come forward, and the audience broke into enthusiastic applause, far louder and more heartfelt than the one Richard received. Keanu hesitated for a moment before humbly stepping up to the stage, his hands tucked casually into his pockets. "Wow, thank you," Keanu started, his tone sincere and modest. "I don't really know what to say. I think it's important to help whenever you can. There are so many people out there who just need a little kindness." He glanced around the room, his eyes settling on the young girl he'd helped earlier, who smiled brightly at him from her wheelchair. The host beamed. "We'd also like to share that Mr. Reeves has made the largest donation in our foundation's history tonight. A check for $1 million. Gasps filled the room, and Richard's face turned pale, his jaw clenching as he struggled to process the revelation. The host gestured to the donation box, and one of the volunteers pulled out the folded check Keanu had quietly placed inside earlier. Sure enough, it bore his signature and the staggering amount. Richard's confidence crumbled, his mind racing with embarrassment and anger. He glanced around, noticing the admiring glances aimed at Keanu and the whispers circulating about his own arrogance earlier. Trying to save face, he forced a stiff smile, but his discomfort was painfully obvious. Keanu, still humble and unassuming, just gave a nod to the host and stepped down from the stage, blending back into the crowd as if nothing had happened. He wasn't interested in the praise or recognition, just in doing the right thing. But Richard couldn't let it go. His ego was bruised, and he couldn't stand being outshined, especially by someone he had just humiliated in front of everyone. Gritting his teeth, Richard muttered to his friend, "I'll show him who's really in charge here." Unbeknownst to him, some guests overheard his words, exchanging uncomfortable glances. A storm was brewing, and Richard was about to make a move that would cost him far more than his pride. As the night continued, Richard couldn't shake off the humiliation. His mind was a whirlwind of anger and jealousy, and he refused to let Keanu walk away as the hero of the evening. Spotting Keanu speaking to a group of volunteers near the refreshments table, Richard straightened his tie and marched over, determined to put him in his place. "Enjoying the attention, are we?" Richard sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. The volunteers fell silent, sensing the tension. Keanu glanced at him calmly, a hint of confusion in his eyes. "I'm just here to support the cause," Keanu replied evenly. "It's not about attention." Richard scoffed. "Oh, please, don't act like you're some saint. You just had to steal the spotlight, didn't you? You think dropping a big check makes you some kind of hero?" Keanu hesitated, trying to choose his words carefully. "I didn't do it to impress anyone. I just wanted to help." Richard leaned in closer, his voice low but menacing. "You don't belong here. This event is for people with real influence and power, not washed-up actors trying to stay relevant." One of the volunteers, a middle-aged woman who had been working tirelessly all night, couldn't hold back. "Excuse me, Mr. Calloway, but Mr. Reeves has supported our foundation long before you even knew it existed. He's helped hundreds of families without asking for anything in return." Richard shot her a withering glare. "Stay out of this. You have no idea who you're talking to." Keanu raised a hand to calm the situation. "It's okay," he said gently. Then he turned to Richard, his gaze unwavering. "You don't have to put others down to feel important. Just let the event be about the people it's meant to help." Richard's temper flared, and without thinking, he reached out and shoved Keanu's shoulder. Caught off guard, Keanu stumbled back, but he didn't retaliate. The room fell dead silent as guests turned to witness the altercation. Just then, a tall man in a dark suit approached with an air of authority. It was James Carter, the chairman of the foundation. He had seen the entire incident, and his expression was a mix of disappointment and anger. "Richard," James said firmly, his voice carrying through the room. "A word, please." Richard swallowed hard, trying to regain his composure. "Of course, Mr. Carter," he replied, forcing a polite smile. He followed James to a more secluded corner, where the chairman fixed him with a stern look. "What was that all about?" James demanded, crossing his arms. "I've known you for years, but I've never seen you act like this." Richard hesitated, his confidence shaken. "It's just, that guy's trying to make me look bad. I'm one of your biggest donors, and he's just an actor. Why does he get all the praise?" James sighed deeply. "You're missing the point, Richard. This isn't a competition. It's about helping those in need. And Keanu, he's been doing that for a long time, without looking for recognition. I thought you came here tonight because you cared about the cause, not because you wanted to be the center of attention." Richard opened his mouth to argue, but couldn't find the words. He glanced back at Keanu, who was now helping an elderly volunteer carry boxes of donated supplies. The realization slowly dawned on him that his actions had not only embarrassed himself, but also tainted the spirit of the event. James continued, his tone softer. "Maybe it's time to reflect on why you're really here. It's not too late to make things right." Richard looked down, guilt gnawing at him, but his pride wouldn't let him admit his mistake. As he stood there, wrestling with his conscience, he couldn't help but notice how Keanu remained composed and graceful, despite the humiliation. But Richard wasn't ready to back down just yet. Instead of taking James's advice, he hatched a new plan, a way to regain control of the narrative and put Keanu in his place once and for all. As the event continued, Richard couldn't let go of his resentment. He couldn't stand the thought of being outshined by a mere actor, no matter how beloved. Spotting a few journalists lingering near the buffet, he saw an opportunity to regain control of his image. He approached them with a confident smile, subtly gesturing toward Keanu. "You know," he began, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "It's admirable how some people pretend to be generous just to keep their careers afloat. It's almost like a publicity stunt, don't you think?" One of the reporters raised an eyebrow. "Are you talking about Keanu Reeves?" Richard forced a chuckle. "I'm just saying, it's convenient timing. Donating a huge sum when his latest film didn't do so well. People will do anything to stay relevant." The reporters exchanged glances, not entirely convinced. "From what I know," one of them replied, "Keanu has been involved with this charity for years. He's pretty low-key about it too." Richard's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered. "Sure, but sometimes the quiet ones have the most to hide. Maybe dig a little deeper. You might find some interesting stories behind the facade." Just as he finished speaking, James Carter appeared beside him, having overheard the entire conversation. He placed a firm hand on Richard's shoulder, his expression unyielding. "Richard, I think you've said enough," he stated, his voice calm but commanding. The reporters, sensing the tension, excused themselves and moved away. Richard tried to protest, but James didn't give him a chance. "What are you doing?" James demanded, lowering his voice. "You're sabotaging the entire event with your petty jealousy. Do you realize how damaging this could be for the foundation?" Richard stiffened, his pride wounded. "I'm just exposing the truth. People like him don't deserve to be praised while those of us who actually fund these events get ignored." James shook his head, clearly disappointed. "This isn't about you. You're letting your ego get in the way of something much bigger. Maybe you should take a break and think about why you're really here tonight." Richard opened his mouth to argue, but stopped when he saw Keanu approaching them, holding a donation box filled with envelopes and small contributions from the guests. Keanu gave a polite nod to both men before handing the box to one of the volunteers. "I just wanted to make sure these didn't get misplaced," he said, his tone genuine. Before he could walk away, James spoke up. "Keanu, I'm really sorry about earlier. Some people forget what this event is truly about." Keanu just gave a modest smile. "It's okay. I didn't come here for validation. I just want to help out." Richard felt his stomach twist with a mix of guilt and frustration. How could Keanu remain so composed after everything? Was he really that sincere? Or was it just an act? Just then, one of the volunteers, an elderly woman named Martha, approached with a grateful smile. "Mr. Reeves, I just wanted to thank you again. Because of your continued support, my grandson was able to get the surgery he needed last year. You've saved his life." Keanu's eyes softened, and he gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm just glad he's okay. That's what matters." Martha gave him a quick hug, wiping away a tear before moving on to her duties. James glanced at Richard, his expression pointed. "Do you see now? Some people don't need the spotlight to make a difference. Maybe it's time you learned that too." Richard didn't respond, his mind racing with conflicting thoughts. Could he have been wrong about Keanu? Was his jealousy blinding him to the truth? As he struggled to process it all, a guest approached, offering words of praise to Keanu for his kindness. But instead of accepting the compliment, Keanu humbly redirected it. "The real heroes are the volunteers who make this event possible. I'm just happy to support them." Richard swallowed hard, feeling his facade crumble. For the first time that night, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he was the one who needed to change. As the night continued, Richard found himself standing alone near the entrance, his mind clouded with guilt and regret. He couldn't shake the realization that his jealousy had consumed him to the point of trying to ruin a noble event. Lost in thought, he barely noticed when Keanu approached him, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. Keanu offered one to him with a calm, sincere expression. "Thought you might need this," he said softly. Richard hesitated before accepting the glass, unable to meet Keanu's eyes. "Why are you being so nice to me after everything I said?" Keanu gave a small, understanding smile. "People make mistakes. We all let our egos get in the way sometimes. What matters is what we do after we realize it." Richard swallowed hard, feeling a knot tighten in his throat. I didn't understand. I thought you were trying to take the spotlight, make me look bad. I've worked so hard to build my reputation, and seeing everyone adore you so effortlessly, it made me feel small." Keanu nodded, his gaze thoughtful. Success doesn't always mean being in the spotlight. Sometimes, it's about what you do when no one's watching. You have a good platform, and the ability to make real changes. Maybe it's time to think about how you can use it to help others. Richard looked at him, genuinely moved by his words. "You're right. I've been so focused on maintaining my image that I forgot what really matters. I wanted people to respect me, but I didn't realize that respect is earned, not demanded." Keanu smiled warmly. People remember how you make them feel, not how much you own. If you're genuine and kind, respect follows naturally. Feeling humbled, Richard extended his hand. I'm sorry for how I treated you tonight. It was wrong, and I let my pride get the best of me. Keanu shook his hand without hesitation. No hard feelings. We're all just trying to do our best. As the event began to wind down, James took the stage to make an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for making tonight a success. Your generosity will help countless families in need, and we couldn't have done it without your support. He then gestured towards Keanu. A special thank you to Mr. Reeves for his ongoing commitment to this foundation. Your kindness continues to inspire us all. The crowd erupted into applause, but Keanu simply gave a humble nod, not wanting the attention. Richard couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration. He finally understood why people respected Keanu, not because of his fame, but because of his genuine heart. As the guests started leaving, Richard noticed Martha struggling to carry some leftover donation boxes to her car. Without thinking twice, he walked over and took a few from her hands. "Let me help you with that," he said, offering a sincere smile. Surprised but grateful, Martha smiled back. "Thank you, dear. That's very kind of you." As Richard loaded the boxes into her car, he couldn't help but glance back at Keanu, who was speaking with a few volunteers. For the first time in a long while, Richard felt lighter, like the weight of his own ego had finally lifted. He knew he had a long way to go to become the man he truly wanted to be. But tonight had opened his eyes. Instead of seeking validation from the world, he needed to focus on doing good for others, just like Keanu did. As he watched Keanu wave goodbye to the remaining guests, Richard took a deep breath, feeling a sense of purpose ignite within him. This wasn't just a lesson about kindness. It was a wake-up call to change his own mindset. And as he drove home that night, he couldn't help but feel grateful for the unexpected lesson taught by a man who never asked for recognition, but earned it effortlessly.